Hello and welcome to the Wildcard Rewind. We're going to continue this week with our preview series, and this week we're going to be talking about the AFC and the NFC East to get you all ready for draft season. So, Paul, after my dancing right at the beginning, let's get straight to it.
I just want to rewind to when we were young at heart. Back to all those good times. Take me back to the start.
Well, that was slightly embarrassing for people that are actually watching the stream because I was doing my little warm-up routine and I had trusted Paul to do the controls this week, and he pressed record before I was ready. So a nice dance for everyone who's watching on the stream there. Hope you enjoyed it. So thanks for that, Paul. It's just you and me this week. So how are you? How's your week been?
Yeah, it's a first for me. I started too early. I normally finish too early. I didn't start too early, sorry for ruining your pre-recording routine. That's what we call it.
I know. Well, I'm all off kilter now, so who knows what I'm going to be like for the rest of the show.
It could go anyway.
Week been all right?
Yeah, it's been good. Today's been a bit mental. So I'm playing in the 5-yard rush rules mania league. Now, if anyone has never played in rules mania league, you each make a rule for the league. And honestly, I think the words that came out of Murph's mouth earlier were, "This is where fantasy football goes to die," because it's just insane. So there's somebody's put, we have to start 2 tight ends. And then somebody else has gone, after each week, you have to drop both your tight ends to the waivers. And then somebody else has now added that we have to drop our highest scoring player to the waivers every week and stuff. So it's going to be insane. Absolutely insane. But I won it last year, so hopefully the streak will continue,
I know. Well, it sounds like you've got to a lot of work to kind of keep up that winning streak, Paul. You're going to be working those waivers every week.
I'm not very good on the waivers. I won't lie. I'd have preferred last year. I think there was very little action on the waivers, and that's why I prefer something like that. But
I know. I think when you're in so many leagues, it just gets tough to scroll through all those waivers, doesn't it? But that's what you got to do when you die hard fantasy fan. That's what you got to do. So we just got to suck it up. And if you want to win again this season, Paul, sounds like you're gonna have to do it.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of exciting divisions to discuss with this week. I think there's quite a lot of fantasy relevant players and fantasy relevant teams in these 2 divisions. So should we get started and discuss the AFC East? And I think when you're discussing the AFC East, I think the first place you probably want to look to start is the Buffalo Bills. Now, we know that Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs are going to be stud fantasy assets again this year, as they have been for multiple years. But I'm interested, Paul, are there any of the players on the Buffalo Bills that you are looking to target this season, or are you kind of out on the Bills apart from those 2 stud players?
So there are 2. Well, I say 2. There's one more than anyone, but I will just clarify, not Dalton Kincaid. Okay, I don't want Dalton Kincaid. Sorry, Mags, I don't want him in redraft. Dynasty, go pick him up everywhere, But redraft, I don't want any of him. Although everyone seems to be drafting him everywhere. I'm not quite sure on his ADP. Maybe you could get that from me, Hannah. But Dalton Kincaid is way overvalued at this moment in time, so I don't want anything to do with him. Have you got it there?
So he is currently, let's have a look. He is tight end 13 at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Apparently, that's above Jake Okonkwo, Greg Dulcich, Tyler Higbee, Gerald Everett. I mean, I agree. I have to be out on him, particularly in redraft. I mean, I think you could, if he went past ADP, I do think you could look at him in best ball, just because I think he might get the odd touchdown and have these spike weeks. But I don't know how you could trust putting him in your starting lineup every week.
Yeah. So the only way I would like to draft Dalton Kincaid, is if I had a solid tight end, and then I'd pick him up as a, like you said, in best ball. If I've got somebody like, I don't know, say I went early for a Travis Kelce, then Dalton Kincaid is somebody that I'd like to pick up and go, well, do you know what? If he hits, he hits. If he doesn't, he doesn't. I'm not in a position where I'm wanting that out of him. So to me, I'd like Dalton Kincaid, but the value is just ridiculous. But the one player I do like the value of more than anything, I know you've got somebody else that you like, but I like James Cook. Now, James Cook didn't really do that much last year. But when you look at that backfield, there really isn't much competition for him. Naheem Hines is now, I believe he's broke his leg. Is it a broken leg that he had? He's got a season
ACL, isn't it? I think it's ACL.
Yeah, he's got a season-ending injury to his leg anyway, so he's out of contention now, and you're sort of going, there's no competition for him, and at the moment, I don't know if we're using the same ADP here, Hannah, but on what I'm looking at, he's ADP of the running back 32, and that to me is just somebody that I want all the pieces of, you know. I think every draft I'm in at the moment, I'm sort of smashing the wide receivers early because you get to sort of a certain round where the wide receiver value just takes a massive plummet, and that's when I'm hitting all the running backs, and that's around this mark that, you know, RB32, and he could be the number one running back in that team. Now, I'm not saying he's going to finish as an RB1 on the season. I can't see him hitting that sort of ceiling, but I can see him performing better than RB32 right now, easily. What do you think?
Do you know what? I do struggle with James Cook a little bit. The things that slightly worry me is that he's obviously a smaller back, so it makes me nervous that he can take like quite a heavy workload. So I definitely think that Damien Harris will be involved, but I personally think he's a small back. He has these explosive runs. So certainly I think there's going to be games where he's going to hit off an explosive run and probably get a touchdown. So I think certainly there will be weeks where I think he'll do well. But my concern is that he might not necessarily get the goal line work. I suspect that they'll put Harris in, or they're going to throw it, or Josh Allen potentially is going to run it in. And that's what makes me nervous. I worry about him getting high value touches. And we know that he's going to be probably the passing back in this offense. I mean, Damien Harris has never shown that he is a pass catcher, but I worry that he's not going to get that many targets because Josh Allen either scrambles himself or usually tries to target. It's rare that they do screens, you know. I can't see how he's going to get enough targets to make him fantasy relevant every week if he doesn't have a big run and a touchdown. So he makes me nervous that he's not going to get the high value touches. That's what makes me nervous about James Cook. But like you say, running back 32, I suppose you could take a punt on him, but he's not one that typically I would be like, oh, I'm going to grab him.
So I'm looking on the Fantasy Pros ADP, and they've got Brian Robinson at 31 and AJ Dillon at 33. Who would you take there? Which one of them three would you take?
So you see, I would probably go AJ Dillon. Now, I think that's because I totally understand with Aaron Jones there last year, he didn't do that great, but with an Aaron Jones injury, I could see AJ Dillon getting all of the work and all of the high value touches. And last season, he was getting a lot of the within the 5 goal line work. So I could just see a path to AJ Dillon potentially being a workhorse if Aaron Jones goes out. But I just can't see that for James Cook. I just don't think he has the build for that. So that's what makes me a bit nervous, because I do feel that ultimately his upside is less than AJ Dillon's. I totally get it. You need an individual.
You can definitely see the difference between them both, because just look at the QB. Josh Allen is a QB that will run it in himself, where I don't know if Jordan Love will be that kind of player, but I don't think he will. I don't think he'll be the type of person to if they're on the the 5-yard line, I can't see Jordan Love scrambling to score a touchdown. I can see them giving it to, like you said, AJ Dillon or Aaron Jones. So, like you said, with the injury, I suppose, I kind of have to agree with you. I did put on the show sheet that I take him over AJ Dillon, but you've
Have I convinced
me.
you?
Yeah, you've convinced me.
I mean, I do get that probably without an injury, maybe Cook will finish higher than AJ Dillon. I don't know how they're going to kind of work this backfield in Green Bay. Towards the end of 2021, AJ Dillon started getting quite a lot of the work, but Aaron Jones had been in and out with injuries, whereas last season Aaron Jones certainly got a lot more of the work. I think more than we expected, because AJ Dillon was being drafted much higher in the off season, so people have cooled on him, but I do think there's still a path to him. Potentially I could see him being an RB1 if Aaron Jones went out, whereas I can't necessarily see an obvious path for James Cook to be a regular reliable RB1.
Yeah, and let's be honest, at this stage, around this area of RB32 onwards, you're kind of looking for them players and they're an injury away from being relevant, and I suppose James Cook is not quite that player, is he really? From this Bills team, he is probably one of the only other people that, apart from Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, he is somebody that I do want. But in reality, if you look at the people around him, I suppose there's value elsewhere,
I think so, but I mean, like you say, at RB32, that there's no harm in taking a punt, right? And I certainly would get some shares of him, but he's not the guy that I'm like, right, out of this group, I'm targeting him. I would like some of him just in case something happens, and he bursts onto the scene and wow, he's doing amazing this season. But I just can't totally see it. I don't feel 100% convinced yet. And
you've got to get a share somewhere, though. You've got to get a share somewhere because you had just in case.
I know. But yeah, I just can't quite, I don't feel totally convinced on him, and I might be totally wrong and eating my words at the end of the season, but I just can't see myself targeting him all the time. So shall we talk Miami Dolphins? So, I mean, when you think about the Miami Dolphins, you totally think about those fantastic receiving weapons that Tua has around him. They're not totally reliant on Tua being healthy, but when he is healthy, you can certainly, you feel much more confident about their fantasy value. But I think from a fantasy perspective, the thing that everyone's kind of wondering at this point is what's going on with the running back room, and, who really is going to come out and be kind of the lead back. There's been lots of kind of murmurings about potentially Dalvin Cook signing, but he seems to have kind of rumors are swinging to him going to the Jets. But at the moment, Devon Achane is leading the way. He's an ADP of running back 40, and then followed by Raheem Mostert. I can't seem to say his name, at running back 51, and then Jeff Wilson at running back 53. So my question is, what do you make of this running back room? Are you drafting any? Are you drafting all of them? Like, what are you doing with the Miami running backs?
I really want to make a Cluedo joke now and goes, Colonel Mostert at the Miami Dolphins with the American football or something, But no, do you know what? This whole room is just a gamble. I think the way people are drafting, everyone believes that it's going to be Achane that is the lead back here. I'm quite happy to, I wouldn't take all three. That would just be ridiculous to have three running backs all for the Dolphins, But the two that I'd take if I would be Achane and Mostert. I'm pretty out on Jeff Wilson. I think Mostert is going to do his normal thing, like week one, have a massive play, runs the length of a field, scores a touchdown. Everyone just goes mad for him, and then he's just going to get injured and miss the rest of the season, But we like to play the ADP game, and at the moment, the RB40, RB51, and RB53, I don't think any of them are a bad pick, to be honest. Personally, I want Achane and I want Mostert, but I just think any one of them, at that ADP. If you can get, if you're talking, these could be your running back 3 or running back 4 on your team, and everyone's worth a gamble at that point. Like we said about James Cook and AJ Dillon and all these, you take Raheem Mostert at RB51, Devon A-Chain gets injured, and all of a sudden Raheem Mostert's got a 3-down roll, or he's seeing 60-40 with Jeff Wilson. It's every one of them everyone's a gamble, but everyone's a cheap gamble,
Yeah, you see, I think that obviously that these are kind of the perfect running back kind of areas to target because it's a messy backfield. We don't know who is going to take the role, and we also don't know, are they going to sign someone? I think people are nervous that they're going to sign someone up, so that's why they're even lower. As soon as they sign someone, or if we find out actually they're not going to sign anyone, I do think potentially at least A-Chain, I think his ADP might rise. But these are the perfect backfields to target because you don't know who's going to, come out of it. It might be a 3-headed monster, and in that case actually probably nobody is particularly useful for you on a regular basis. You're probably going to get spike weeks from all of them, or like you say, 1 or 2 of them gets injured and suddenly someone's having to be a workhorse and they're becoming fantasy valuable for you. I like this backfield again from more of a best ball kind of environment where you don't have to put them in your lineup. If they do well, they'll go in. If they don't, they're just on your bench. I think it's potentially, at least to start the season for sure, it's going to be tricky to put them in, I think, because I suspect they will start as a bit of a 3-headed monster, and then maybe someone will either take over or they're going to work their hot hand. So someone will be taking most of the carries 1 week, someone else the next. So I think it's going to be tricky in redraft to pick and choose who that's going to be. But at this price, what have you got to lose? If they're not getting enough work, you just drop them and pick someone off on the raise wire, or in best ball leagues, they're in those really kind of low down rounds. So, what have you lost? Very little. Your opportunity cost is nothing. So I've actually taken a punt on all 3 of them, not on the same team, but, on different teams. I've taken all of them because someone is going to be fantasy relevant at some point. And if someone does totally win the job, well, they're a screaming value, aren't they?
Yeah, 100%. I think I'm with you. I think that if they do, if they were to come out and say, look, we're not in the market for a veteran running back, I do think that A-Chain's ADP will shoot up. He'll be everyone will want him because everyone's convinced that he's going to be the number one there. But I do agree that there is that level of fear. Like you said, Dalvin Cook was rumored to be going there, and then he's rumored to be going to the Jets, and I just don't know where he's going to end up, to be honest. He's going to ruin the fantasy value of somebody somewhere. We just don't know which one it's going to be yet, But I kind of agree with you in the sense that you want these in best ball. I think they're great picks in best ball. But
yeah, absolutely. It'd be interesting to see, at the end of the season, who actually came out and who, potentially won that job, who got injured. I'm really interested to see where they all finish. Should we carry on the theme of running backs and potentially discuss the New York Jets? So what we wanted to discuss really was Breece Hall, and I'm really interested to know, what are your thoughts on him for this season? His current ADP is actually running back 10, which is 26th overall. So really quite high, I think, for a player coming off quite a significant injury. Now, I know it's nowhere near as bad as a J.K. Dobbins or a Javonte Williams type injury, but it still is an ACL tear. They're not nothing injuries. So what do you think, Paul? Do you like Breece Hall at his current ADP? Are you drafting him or are you staying away?
I've tried to stay away. He worries me. He worries me a lot. I think his ADP is more, it is that high to do with people. A lot of people play Dynasty, a lot of people play Redraft. And I think a lot of people start to, when they go from that Dynasty to that Redraft mindset, they continue to draft certain players and, I think Breece Hall for me is very high there for somebody that's coming off a serious injury, and like we just said about AJ, and his ADP is RB40 because of the rumors of Dalvin Cook going there. Yet Dalvin Cook is rumored to go to the Jets, and we're still happy to take Breece Hall at RB10. I don't want any part of that. If Dalvin Cook goes there, I'm not saying he's going to take over that job 100%. When Breece Hall is back to 100%, I can see him beating Dalvin Cook out of that job. I just think that he's not 100%. He's not ready to go, and it may be sort of week, I don't know, maybe week 6, maybe week 5, where he starts to pay back the value of an RB that early. Now, to invest an early pick like that on a player that you're not going to get much out of for the first 5 weeks could really jeopardize your whole season then. You're 5 weeks in, and so far you're 0-5. Now, don't get me wrong, you've still got an opportunity to make the playoffs, but you're already battling for that. Whereas if you were to go for, and I know it's all a bit of a this and that, everyone could get injured and stuff like that. But for me, I think at 26, we're talking that's early into round 302, that sort of value. If you're, say we're playing in a 1 QB league, well, I think if I was, so I'm trying to work it out now, if it was a snake draft, you'd be, to get him, you'd sort of have to be at the back end of a draft, the back end of
beginning of round 3, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, so
26 overall. So either on third round reversely, but at the back end, or normal.
So if you're third, if you're third, normal third round, you are. So if you have the 101, say the 102, you'd have the 211, and then you'd have the 302, and that's where he's going at the moment. So for me, I'd rather take CMC at the 102 if he falls that far. CMC or Eckler at the 102, and then smash wide receiver the next 2, and then I haven't got to worry about Breece Hall, and I haven't got that. I was looking earlier at the ADP, and around that value is Chris Olave. Give me Chris Olave over Breece Hall any day of the week, but in a 1 QB league, I genuinely be looking to go running back in my first round, and then I don't have to touch running back for the next 4 or 5 rounds, and then that takes me out of the equation of Breece Hall. I'd rather let somebody else do it. What do you think?
Yeah, I find this one really tricky because I can kind of see why people are doing it. It's the second half of the season play, isn't it? You're thinking he's going to ramp up first half of the season, and then by kind of the end of the regular season, the fantasy playoffs, he's going to be a league winner. Is basically why people are taking him. But I totally understand your point as well, Paul, because at round 3, really, you need that player to be a consistent producer on your team to try and get you to the fantasy playoffs. Now, if you've drafted well, then maybe you can afford for Hall to sit on your IR or, on your bench for a few weeks. But you have very little margin for error if your third round pick is not giving you anything for the first half of the season. Like, you have to have drafted really well, or you work the waivers really, really well the first few weeks that you manage to kind of compensate for that. So I think if you do take him, you have to be really, really aware that you really need to be active to be able to compensate for that. He does make me nervous because there's a study that I read which says that it's common knowledge that running backs coming off an ACL injury do perform in fantasy terms much poorer for the first year after injury than, like the second, third and fourth years after injury. So it's shown that their fantasy performance drops for that whole year. So I do think that we're kind of expecting him to come back and be just this amazing player. Now, I think a lot of people then say, oh, well, Adrian Peterson could do it. But that's like one player in like however many players that have...
He's older than me.
have had ACL tears, historically. So, you're kind of saying, oh, the unicorn managed to do it, so therefore every player must be a unicorn, and that's not necessarily the case. Now, maybe Breece Hall will prove us wrong, and he will be like Adrian Peterson, and he can just suffer an ACL tear and seemingly never even show that he's had it. But it's not it's not a given that that's going to happen. So I think you have to be careful when you draft him, and you have to be aware that is kind of what you're going to get. I think in best ball you can probably cover it up a bit more as long as you're drafting kind of quite cleverly later on. But I think in redrafts it is. I personally think it is harder to kind of cover him over, but we'll see. Maybe Breece Hall fans are going to be laughing in our face at the end of the season when they're holding that championship trophy. But I am always nervous about players coming off injury like this the first year back. But he is an absolute stud when he's healthy. But I don't know how fully healthy he is going to be. So it does make me nervous as well, Paul.
I agree.
Should we talk New England Patriots? Yay!
No.
Everyone's looking forward to this. No. So, I mean, it was a complete shambles last season, wasn't it? I mean, was there anything fancy relevant you could get out of that? No, not really. But everyone's now really down on them. And actually, in best ball, it's now the cheapest stack that you can get. So my question to you, Paul, is are you also out on the New England Patriots? Or do you think there may be some hidden gems there that people should target that they're not necessarily thinking about?
So I'm going to name two players. One I think is on everyone's tip of their tongue, and that's Ramondre Stevenson, and that is probably the biggest value in the New England Patriots team. And I'm gonna back him again. I'm probably a bit like our good friend Kev, who lives and dies by this sword, but Juju Smith-Schuster as well. They've got to throw the ball to somebody. They've got to, and I'll back him. I'll back him again. Let's go for it. But anyone is Ramondre Stevenson. That's the one guy that I want from that team because he is going to rush the ball.
Yeah, like you say, everyone is talking about Ramondre, and I do agree. I think his ADP was pretty high recently because obviously we thought he's going to be the main guy there.
11.
Yeah, so he's still 10 at the moment, but obviously there's been certain discussions about them adding a veteran in. And again, that might not dent his value at all. It might just be that they come in, when he's having a rest. But I do think all of these kind of rumours about a veteran coming in might just drop his ADP a bit more. And if that's the case, then I'm definitely scooping him up. But this veteran talk, I think, potentially is spooking people a little bit. But we know that he has a great all-round skill set. We just need to make sure that Bill Belichick uses him as such. And hopefully he does. Because he's got the talent. Juju, I find it more difficult to get in on because I think we know what we get with Juju now. And again, I'm just not... He's an all right flex play, right? But where's the upside, Paul? He's not going to be a league winner for me, is he? I suppose he's got a floor. If you've got a lot of upside picks and you want a floor, then Juju's your guy, but...
He's currently wide receiver 46 at 109th off the board. So, you know what I mean? You're not drafting him. You're not drafting him as that guy that you need, 15 points a week out of. You're not drafting him at that position. You're drafting him as he may be a flex play. That may be all you need him for. But when you think about it, they've got to throw the ball to somebody, and Juju is going to be the guy that catches the ball. And do you know what? I said this last year. I said this about him at the Chiefs. I was like, Juju's going to be the guy there. And I'm probably just going to live and die on this sword,
Yeah, I get that. I think my problem is Juju. I think if you take Juju, I think you're drafting scared. I think that is the perfect drafting scared move.
I'll draft scared.
Because around him are Quentin Johnston, Michael Thomas, Gabe Davis, Zay Flowers. So to me, all of those four players have much higher upside than Juju. at this point in the draft, what we're looking at, I can't remember what round they're in, overall player 100. So, you're looking at those later rounds. If you want to potentially go and win your fantasy, championship, you're kind of looking at, you want players in that round, I think personally, that have an upside that if they hit, you're laughing and you're ahead of everyone. So like Quentin Johnston is probably not going to do much at the beginning of the season, but he could certainly come along in the second half of the season and become the wide receiver 2 on the LA Chargers. And, I think you're going to be wanting a piece of that offense this year. So I would definitely take him over Juju. I would take a punt on Michael Thomas over Juju, because even though he's not been on the field for many years, when he has been a wide receiver 1. Now, as I say, that might be the end of him now, but why not take a punt? Because Juju is never going to be wide receiver 1. Gabe Davis, again, I think has more upside. Same with Zay Flowers. We don't know who's going to be the wide receiver 1 in Baltimore, and it could be Zay Flowers. Rashad Bateman doesn't seem to want to not be injured. So I think all 4 of those players have more upside than Juju, and I would pick them over him.
Okay. So your first one that you named was Quentin Johnson, yeah?
Yeah.
He's also got to battle with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Okay. Mike Williams, I'll give you him. He could probably beat him for the job, but I don't see him taking anything away from Keenan Allen.
But still, if he beats out Mike Williams, we know what Mike Williams can be when he's healthy.
I suppose, but he's got to do that. I'm just going to list you some names, okay, from the New England Patriots, okay? Kendrick Bourne, Riley Webb, Keyshawn Boutte, Devontae Parker, Tyquan Thornton, Demario Douglas, and Matthew Slater. Juju's got nobody better than him.
But we also know that they're probably going to run it quite a lot as well.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So, it's the Chargers are a very pass-happy offense. The Patriots, not so much. So I just think even if he gets a high target share, that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be, equal fantasy points.
And do you know what? I'm gonna come up myself with an argument as well. Justin Herbert had 477 completions last year.
How many did Mac Jones have?
Mac Jones only threw the ball 442 times. That's completions, okay? So he had more completions than he completed 288.
Case closed.
So do you know what? I'll stick up for you there, but I still want parts of Juju, because somebody's going to catch 288 balls. Okay,
I'm going to make you a better player, Paul. You're going to be winning loads this season.
I'm going to make a bet with you.
Go on,
I'm going to make a bet. I think that Juju Smith-Schuster outscores Quentin Johnson this season.
Well, I have to say that's not necessarily fair, because ultimately he might.
You just told me that you're going to draft Quentin Johnson over Juju Smith-Schuster.
Even if he's not going to give me anything at the beginning of the season, he's probably going to give me a lot more. Okay, how about this? How about this? In the fantasy playoffs, Quentin Johnson is going to score more points than Juju.
Yeah, but no, because I want the start of the season where Juju's going to score more.
Yeah, but I was going to say nobody cares about the start of the season. Nobody cares if they are not 0-5 about the start of the season. Do you know what I mean? If you make it to the end of the season, like that is where you're going to start pulling away from the pack.
We'll definitely have a bet in here somewhere.
Okay.
We'll definitely
you just don't want to take my bet because you know you're going to lose.
You don't want to take my bet because you know you're going to lose that one. So,
well, I don't know. Maybe not necessarily. What is it? More fantasy points?
More fantasy points on the season. Juju over Quentin Johnson.
It's possible, but that doesn't mean I want him on my team. Right, I'm sorry, Paul. We can't talk about this any further. We're running late, so I'm not discussing this anymore with you. So just really quickly before we move on, we're going to give our favourite player or a player that we're targeting or a player that we like at their current ADP who's from this division for the 2023 season and why. So, Paul, who is your guy?
I really want to say Sauce Gardner because they're just Sauce's boss, but he's not fantasy relevant. So I'm going to be a bit of a, oh yeah, we all seen that one coming, and that's Garrett Wilson. Okay, Garrett Wilson is the guy that I love in this division this year.
Yawn, Paul, yawn. Chalk. So this isn't my favourite guy, but I do think now he's more appropriately priced. I do really like him in fantasy this year, and that is Gabe Davis. Look, they didn't add anyone to this wide receiver core. Yes, I know they added Dalton Kincaid, but I'm not convinced that he's going to come in straight away and take all of the targets. Gabe Davis was playing injured last season. He's currently now ADP wide receiver 45. Give me some Gabe Davis. I think that he's going to outperform that ADP, and I think he's going to show us that he is better than we think and then we saw last season. So I'm going to say Gabe Davis.
I love it. I can't argue with it.
Yeah, I mean, last year he was very expensive and he didn't pay off, but this year he's way more reasonably priced. So go and get him. Right, let's move on to the NFC East. We need to start getting a wriggle on now. We've been enjoying too much discussion and bets. So let's talk Philadelphia Eagles. So, I mean, we know the QB, we know the wide receivers. Everyone knows that they're going to be high draft picks this season. But the place that we're all kind of scratching our heads and wondering what's going to happen is this running back room. So there's loads of different opinions about how this is going to shake out. Some people think DeAndre Swift's going to be the lead. Some people think Rashard Penny. So currently their ADP, all of the ADPs we've been discussing are for PPR leagues. So DeAndre Swift is running back 21, whereas Rashard Penny is running back 36. So what do you think, Paul? I mean, do you think that it's Swift's job to lose, or are you liking Penny? How do you think this is all going to shake out?
I don't want to answer it.
Because you don't know?
Yeah. I don't think anyone knows. I think the only person that's going to be happy about the way that they drafted this was the person that's holding the one that gets all the work, you know. I think this is very similar to, and I know I said I wanted James Cook earlier, but I think this is very similar. You know, can you see either one of these getting the ball inside the 5 and scoring a touchdown, or can you see them giving it to Jalen Hurts and letting him run it in, or throwing it to AJ Brown or Devontae Smith or Dallas Goedert? You know, I think this is such a high-powered offense that actually the running backs sort of seem to be the part that you don't want of this team. You know, I think everyone wants a part of Jalen Hurts. Everyone wants the wide receiver room. Everyone wants Dallas Goedert as that sort of last elite tight end. Nobody wants the running back room. But if I was to say which one I'd want Penny. And that's only because he's the cheaper value. You know, going at RB36, he's the guy that I'd want. I don't think I'd want DeAndre Swift at RB21. And I love DeAndre Swift. I loved him at the Lions, and I thought he was great. You know, to me, I'd want the cheaper asset.
Yeah, I agree here. I think this is a tough one, isn't it? Now, I do think there is actually, so last season, Miles Sanders had 11 touchdowns. So there are certainly touchdowns to be had in this offense. And I think someone will get them. I personally really like, if Rashard Penny stays healthy, I do feel like he could take this backfield. Like, we know what he can do. He can be a fantastic runner. You know, we've seen him do it before. He's finished as a fantasy RB1. You know, I do like Rashard Penny for taking that role because he is that kind of bruiser running back, whereas DeAndre Swift is a bit more, you know, we know what he can do receiving wise, but we know that again, they're not going to do screens. They don't pass their running backs all that often. And just because they've added Swift doesn't mean that that's going to necessarily change. No, it might a little bit, but I just can't see it becoming like a big factor in this offense. And again, I just don't see him as this heavy hitting running back. Now, I have heard on and off reports in camp that this is Swift's role to lose, blah, 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 blah. But you never really know whether you can trust them or not. My concern is that Penny's going to get injured, and then ultimately I don't think necessarily that Swift would become a 3-down back then. I think they'd probably mix in a bit of Kenny Gainwell, and things like that. So I'm really not keen on this running back room in general. I prefer to take Penny, but it does make me a bit nervous because we know that he can get injured. But at running back 36, look, again, if we're looking for upside, then why not? I think Swift is quite expensive.
I think that everyone are drafting Swift based on the fact that they've been hurt by Penny in the past. They've drafted Penny, he's got injured, he's been nothing, and I think that's why people are leaning more towards the Swift side of this running back room.
Yeah, although we know that Swift has had his fair share of injuries.
Yeah,
I do think there are still some Swift truthers out there, and he certainly has flashed some talent. But I can't get on that Swift train. I just can't do it. I haven't taken him actually most of this kind of draft season, but I've taken a couple of shares of him recently because I was like, if I'm wrong, then I can't.
You've got to have one share. You've got to have one share just in case.
Exactly. I've been wrong before. None of us are perfect. So I was like, I'll take a couple. If it pays off, wow, I'm wrong. If it doesn't, I was right. It's a win-win situation, really, isn't it?
100%.
Let's talk Dallas. I'm really interested about Dak Prescott, Paul, because opinions, I think, have really soured on him. He didn't have the world's best season last season. He had loads of turnovers. But historically, he has been considered a borderline kind of elite QB in fantasy. Now, I think maybe that's because he was doing a bit more rushing, and obviously more recently he hasn't been doing so much after his multiple injuries. But he's currently ADP QB9, 86 overall. So do you agree with his current ADP? Or what do you think of him?
I love Dak. He is a QB that I seem to get a lot of. And he does what he says on the tin, okay? You're going to draft him at QB9 and he is going to pay back that value. He's not going to finish outside of the top 12 QBs. He could do better than that. He can do better than QB9. But you're pretty much, he's a safe bet in my opinion. I know he's going to do that. He's going to repay that. And let's be honest, he is a great QB. We've seen it many a times. He can throw the ball about. He can maintain so many players and make them all fantasy relevant. And I want, everyone wants a part of CD Lamb. If you want a part of CD Lamb, why do you not want a part of Dak? To me, it's smash play. Love Dak. I think he'll be great this year. And there's another player that on that team that you want to speak about in a little bit. And, that to me, if you want all of these pieces, the person that makes all these pieces work is Dak Prescott. I love him.
Yeah, I think people have got scared that, Mike McCarthy's got rid of the OC, and he's just going to want to run the ball all the time. And I think maybe they might slightly more, but he has said he doesn't fundamentally want to change loads and loads of things. I really like Dak as my QB2, particularly in the Superflex leagues. I would say I'm at the moment less happy with him being a QB1, but we know that he can use his legs. If he starts running again a bit more, I do think he could end up being, a mid high-ish, QB1. So I don't have any qualms about taking him. I would say probably nowadays I'm not excited about taking him anymore. But we know that he can throw the ball. I don't think he's going to have half as many turnovers as he did last season. And I think he's probably been focusing a lot on that. So I think he certainly will be a QB1, probably low end like he's being drafted, but I'd be happy with him as my QB2 on a Superflex team, I think.
Yeah, like I said, you're excited about taking Justin Fields or Jalen Hurts or somebody like that. You're excited what they're going to do. Dak is your safe bet. If you could take Justin Fields and get Dak as well as your QB2, you're laughing. You've got your upside play with Justin Fields, who could absolutely smash it this year and be absolutely incredible. But you've also got your safe bet in Dak. He's, like I said, he does what he says on the tin. He is literally your Heinz baked beans. You know what you're getting. It's great. It's going to taste amazing, and you're gonna take him, and he's just going to do what it says on the tin.
Yeah, agreed. The New York Giants, another hazy wide receiver room. They seem to have like 1 trillion slot receivers, and then obviously recently they added one more on Cole Beasley. Like, I have no idea how this is going to play out, but people do seem to be relatively high on Daniel Jones this season. He's being drafted as a QB 15, and we know that he does have some upside with those legs, but they seem to have very little interest in his pass catchers other than Darren Waller. But he is, like you said, Paul, he's going to throw the ball to more than one guy. So surely one of these wide receivers is going to be fantasy relevant, or do you just think that it's going to be scatter shot the ball all over and nobody is?
So the best way to describe this wide receiver room is when you go into a casino and you play roulette. Okay, you just don't know, you don't know which number is going to come up. It could be any of them. You know what I mean? This, like you said, there's so many of them. I think they're all going to get targets. I think that's why Daniel Jones is so high. All of these are going to get targets. I just don't think that any of them are going to be anything that you want as a fantasy relevant player. I think there are a few that I have taken at the back end of drafts, like your is it Isaiah Hodgins, because he flashed a few times last year, and there's people that I want like that as I've got a bit just in case. What's the rookie called? Wan'Dale Robinson. That's the other guy that I will take just to say I've got a bit. But apart from that, there's not really much that I want out of this one. Is there anyone that you want out of this backfield?
This backfield I think is certainly a best ball kind of play here. Like, I wouldn't be keen on having them on my benches in a redraft league, because I just don't think on a weekly basis you're going to be confident to put them in and think that they're going to give you anything. I think if they're going to have spike weeks, great, they're on your bench in a best ball, and then they'll come on your team. But I think other than that, I'm kind of staying away. The only other player that I have taken a bit of in best ball is Darius Slayton, just because he's one of the only players that isn't one of the slot wide receivers. I'm a bit nervous about Wan'Dale, to be honest, because we know he's got the injury from last year and they have like 1 million other slot receivers. So why would they rush him back and get him on this field when they've got 1 million other players that could do the same job for him? So they can ease him in really slowly. So I'm just not keen on him for fantasy this year. But again, he might work his way back into relevance by next season, I think, on him.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to look at the ADPs.
They're all ridiculously low.
So Paris Campbell's 80. Wan'Dale Robinson is 88. Darius Slayton is 84. Sorry, Antonio Brown is 93.
He ain't ever playing again.
So 5 spaces behind Wan'Dale Robinson is Antonio Brown. What? What a world we live in.
Must be drafting drunk, surely.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree. I think, again, dart throws in the back end of a best ball draft. Why not? Redraft, no thank you.
Yeah. Don't really want much to do with them. And like trying to use the same argument that I was using with Juju, somebody's got to catch the ball. But I do feel that Juju stands out in that backfield, whereas I don't think there is a standout player in this backfield that you go, oh, he's the unicorn. Let's draft the unicorn. So
Yeah, I mean, again, I think people are picking that as Darren Waller, aren't they? So I don't think there's any wide receivers there that people are super excited about. Just before we finish, let's quickly talk Washington Commanders again. Woo! I mean, there have been loads of different differences on opinion of their current starting QB, Sam Howell, and his viability really as being a starter in the NFL going forward. I'm just interested, Paul, what do you think about him? Do you have him as a late round target? Are you fading him? What do you think of him?
I like him. I like him. I took a lot of him last year in Dynasty, so I do like him in that more than I do redraft. I do like him. I think that he gets that job. I think that Jacoby Brissett is maybe he looks okay at times. He does look really good, but I just think that the Commanders will roll with Sam Howell this year, and it's kind of one of them. If he's bad and he's really bad, they'll accept that and just go, we're going to have an early pick next year. Next year's got quite a good QB class. So I think for redraft, I think he's not a bad play this year. I think he's somebody that I do target as a late round QB. And I think if I was in a super flex role, I think I'd look at taking at least 4 QBs if I was to look at taking Sam Howell, because I feel like there is a bit of a risk with him. He is a good play, but he's a bit risky. So if I could take 2 safe QBs at the start, let's go with the Justin Fields and the Dak Prescott again. If I could take them 2, I think I would literally fade QBs, and then I'd take Sam Howell later on, and I'd probably take somebody that like a Ryan Tannehill maybe. Again, he's a bit of a risky play because I can see him starting the season. Can I see him starting the whole season? Maybe not. So I've kind of got 2 safe players with Dak Prescott and Justin Fields, and then 2 risky QB plays because I'm only going to really need them for 2 weeks of the season, and that's when there are, Justin Fields and Dak Prescott are on bye. Otherwise, it's injuries more than anything, isn't it? So, what do you think of Sam Howell?
Yeah.
I feel like you're going to disagree with everything I've just said.
No, not necessarily. We'll disagree on one thing, but that's actually not Sam Howell related, and that's Ryan Tannehill related. I actually think now that they've got I can't think of his name. Your friend, yes.
DeAndre Hopkins. I'm wearing a t-shirt now.
I know. Well, you have to get a new one now. It's gone out of my head. Now they've got Hopkins, I think they're more likely to want to keep Tannehill on the field, and I just don't think Levis is good enough to steal that job from him. But that's for a discussion on another program. In terms of Sam Howell, I just can't quite decide what they're going to do, because so we know that Ron Rivera, I think, is on the hot seat. They've got new ownership. So Ron Rivera he's been there 3 seasons, hasn't he? And he's had basically losing seasons all 3, but he still managed to make it into the playoffs, one because the division was so terrible. So he's never had a decent season. If they're rubbish again, I think he's on the hot seat. So do they, 1, play with Sam Howell, even if he's rubbish, get a high draft pick, but knowing that probably they're going to lose their jobs? Or do they, 2, if Sam Howell's terrible, say, quick, we need to try and save our jobs and put Jacoby Brissett in, hoping to be kind of competent and also competitive, in the hope that they're going to save their jobs? And that's what I don't know what they're going to do. I think if there was no risk about anybody losing their jobs, they would definitely run with Sam Howell all season, even if he was rubbish. But I'm just not. I'm a bit concerned that because their jobs are on the line, and if he's rubbish, they might be like, right, we can't risk this. We've got to get Brissett in because we've got to save our jobs, even if it's not necessarily the best thing to do for the franchise.
Yeah, I also think that the new owners might want that sexy, shiny new QB next year and make a splash. They come in, they buy the team, and then all of a sudden things start going wrong that they go, we're going to go and get.
Are you trying to sell Kyler already?
No.
You are, aren't you?
No. I want Kyler there next year. I want him there next year. I've decided. But
you don't sound convincing, Paul.
That's for a different show, Hannah. But I think they'll roll with Sam Howell, and I think that's going to be the new owners stepping in and going, we want a good draft pick next year. We want to go and get one of these big, awesome QBs, and they want to do that and go, we've come in, we've gone for this, we want this, we've got this shiny new QB. Let's go. We're going to win Super Bowls. I think that's the way I'm not saying they will win Super Bowls, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that's what the new owners are going to be like. Oh, let's go and make a splash, So I think they roll with Sam Howell all year.
Yeah, maybe. And I mean, he may be better than I think he is, but I'm just not convinced he's going to turn into a franchise QB. Now, we know that he can do some running with his legs, so that's where I think he might have some fantasy relevance. But if he stays on the field, I think he's probably, low range, fantasy relevant, low end QB2 or something. But I'm just not convinced he's going to be a decent starter long term. But we'll see. He's actually my QB3 in Scott Fishbowl, so I need him to do something.
Fingers crossed.
I know. So quickly before we kind of finish up the episode, again, as we did with the last division, we're going to give our favourite players, plays, targets in this division for the 2023 season and why.
So I'm going to say Brian Robinson, the running back for the Washington football team. I'm going to say Redskins then. I'm going to, again, I've got to stick with it. He was my flag plant last year on the Wildcard show, which we'll be doing soon, the Dynasty show. I've drafted him everywhere, so if I'm going to draft him everywhere, he's got to be my guy that I back in this division. What about yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm interested. I don't know how that backfield is going to play out. Actually, I think it's going to be interesting. I don't know whether they're going to try and get Antonio Gibson back into the fold a bit more. I'm not sure. But so my one is actually Michael Gallup. He is currently being drafted as wide receiver at 64. So I totally understand that he is technically the wide receiver 3 on this team now, but I do think that he will still get a decent target share. And I don't necessarily think that Brandon Cooks has that wide receiver 2 role, like signed, sealed, delivered, locked down. Like Gallup's getting quite a big a lot of money this season, so he's 1 year off that ACL injury. So wide receiver 64, give me Michael Gallup, because I do think exactly, I do think he's going to have some decent fantasy relevance. Now again, redraft might be a bit of a challenge to know when he is or isn't relevant, but 100% in best ball, I'm eating him up. I think he is definitely going to outpay that wide receiver 64 ADP. Well, that was quite fun, wasn't it? There was certainly some fun teams to talk about, some meh teams to talk about, but hopefully we've given some of our fantasy opinions to help you win your drafts. So, Paul, it's been great talking, but that does bring us to the end of the show. So to everyone who's listening, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us. So on Twitter, we're at Wildcard Rewind, and make sure you head over to the YouTube channel and search for the Fantasy Wildcard Podcast Network. And again, give us a subscribe on there. God, they're not going to find us now, are they? Because I've said it all wrong. But anyway, we're everywhere. Just find us, right?
Do you want to give us a dance before we go? Or?
Well, they had it at the beginning. They're not getting one at the end. It's that's way too much dancing for one evening. So anyway, next week we'll carry on with our division preview series. Otherwise, we will see you next week.
I just wanna rewind.
Sorry.